agencies with this murder case?
They would not risk any procedural errors, according to Assistant U.S. Attorney Jim Woolley.
When you don't have the defendants or the criminals caught on videotape, people don't confess right away, and you're trying to get evidence, you have to get evidence legally. You've got to use search warrants, you've got to use subpoenas, you've got to get evidence in a way that's legal so you can later use it in court.
A Superior Court judge signed a warrant that allowed Eastlake Police to search Verdi's home for evidence in the fraud case. FBI agents accompanied them. Legally, they could only observe.
We went there to look for bank documents, and if we saw anything else that we thought might be evidence or have anything to do with this case out in Perkins Township, we would let the FBI know that we saw something that might be interesting.
The suspect was not at home, but his wife was fully cooperating. When they explained the warrant and her rights, she let them in. But it was Mark Verdi's name that was on the warrant, so they decided to wait. They didn't want to do anything that might jeopardize using evidence in a later trial. After half an hour, Mark Verdi came home. He learned of the fraud case against him and that with the warrant, they could search his entire house.
Ted, Chris, why don't you guys start upstairs? Jimmy, you can listen in the basement.
Upstairs, the search quickly paid off when officers found papers relating to the alleged bank fraud. But more importantly, they also discovered several items that might help the FBI with the Hardlaw murder.
You found a briefcase. And, you open up the briefcase, there's a mask in there, there's gloves, and the grinder was in there. And shavings, metal shavings.
The grinder and shavings might be related to the serial number, ground off the murder weapon recovered from the van.
As we're searching, we see a map, and it's folded up unusually, and we look at it, and open it up a little bit, and you see Sandusky, Perkins Township area, highlighted, pointed out.
The murder had taken place in Perkins Township, and Verdi was pulled over in neighboring Sandusky. It was time for Special Agent Stuart Schoaf and the other agents to take on a role beyond that of observers.
We decided to get a federal search warrant, and we did that, waiting some time at the residence while several agents went back to the office and drafted the affidavit of search warrant.
With the federal warrant outlining evidence sought in connection with the murder, agents could conduct an additional search of the Verdi home and seize any related items. It did not take long to find more incriminating evidence, including a Mac 11 semi-automatic handgun, the same model as the murder weapon. Its serial number was ground off in the same manner as the killer's gun, suspect Stephen Lee's car. Though 2 weeks had passed since the murder, the car did contain evidence for Special Agent Holloway.
During the processing, we located 2 shell casings, 9mm shell casings in the vehicle.
The 9mm specification was the right caliber for use in the Mac 11. Agents sent the shells to the FBI's ballistics lab for comparison against the murder weapon. Technicians also recovered hair samples from the back seat of the car.
And we found spatters of what was determined to be human blood on the rear of the passenger seat.
Liquefying the blood with distilled water, the technicians collected samples. Agents wondered if the blood got there on the night of the shooting. Testing would show it was not the same blood type as the victims. Perhaps it was the killers. Investigators recalled that the bullets had been split by the faulty silencer, possibly injuring the shooter. Neither Stephen Yee nor Mark Verdi seemed to have a fresh gunshot wound. But the family of the third suspect, John Bonds, reported he had had his arm in a sling the day after the murder, allegedly due to a work injury. To check the story, the FBI interviewed Bonds' employer and asked about the days surrounding the murder.
Advises that John was scheduled to be at work on the night of February 27th when the homicide had been failed for work schedule, and he had not been back since.
There was no record of Bonds suffering any injury at work. The pieces were falling into place, but they still had no direct proof.
We obtained a search warrant for hair sample, blood sample, and for John to be examined by a physician for signs of him having sustained some type of a gunshot wound.
They had the warrant. Now they needed to find the suspect.
Just like any other fugitive search, family, friends, continuously checking back with the employer, spot check his residence, other places that he's known to hang out, such as a clubhouse, friends, bars where he can hang out, and all that was done with the work of John Bond, so unsuccessfully.
In 1988, Ohio authorities sought John Ray Bonds, who had left the area after a murder in Perkins Township. After weeks of searching for Bonds, Special Agent Charles Holloway got an important call.
On March 14th, 1988, John's attorney contacted the Cleveland office of the FBI and said that John knew that the FBI was attempting to locate him and that he would present himself at the FBI office in Cleveland on March the 16th of 1988, which he did.
Agents served Bonds with a warrant requiring him to give a blood sample. The doctor concluded a fresh tattoo on his arm covered a recent injury. Bonds did not know the FBI was developing innovative DNA profiling technology that might conclusively match a suspect's blood to samples from a crime scene. Since no law officer could commit such agents hoped that if they did find a match, the courts would accept the science and
Somebody wanted him dead.
Interviews that we
There was a lot of motivation.
but we did not have fingerprints.
Maybe
from
this
John
was a
Bonds.
contract.
With only circumstances or bandage, prosecutors did not want arrests yet.
Somebody wanted
so
him
Bonds
dead.
was released.
There was a lot of motivation that maybe this was a contract killing.
Then,
Could have been a murder for
March
hire.
22nd,
Somebody definitely
an
wanted
Ohio
him dead.
Department of Transportation cleanup crew working the highway McClung and another canine handler had their dogs search for the suspect's trail leading away from the van. But neither dog found a hand any scent, a wool hat and a glove.
As a canine handler, it was my job to interpret what the
And a
dog was
box
trying
of
to tell us.
9mm
And
ammunition. The
I believe
caliber
the dog was telling us that
in
the
Mac
suspects left in the car.
Other investigators they called authorities. Items further implicated the Cleveland gang, former prosecutor Jim Worley. He realized they might have seen the shooting suspects the previous night.
It would be a route from travel if they were driving from Sandusky. On the way back
Hours earlier, the two officers had pulled over a dark suspect might be making an illegal right turn to drove away from the crime. FBI technicians collected the evidence for analysis. They had identified the driver as martyrs in the FBI's hairs and fibers lab. Compared the evidence from the height the front passenger they already had, owned the vehicle.
Fibers
Both men lived in Cleveland
had been
suburbs.
located on the murder weapon. Fibers consisted
The officers
of
noticed
blood
he wore a belt buckle with the Cleveland biker gang's insignia and a hunting knife, though that was not illegal.
And
They
fibers were found consistent with carpet and
Made in this addition, the hair found on the gloves matched the hair recovered from the back seat of the car. Alleged pretty similar. At the firearms and tool marks, especially Charles Holloway got an important trying to find a trade.
March 1988, John's attorney contacted Cleveland House Brand Bank
through a chemical restoration trial with the FBI.
Agent Sheriff Fonzo required a blood sample.
And then you can trace that
A fresh tattoo on his arm, checking the counts of use of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Investigators found the murder weapons registered to look up. He confirmed that he used to own that Mac similar to and the one found at her lake house. Several months earlier, both guns had been stolen from his car, which he parked outside a friend's house. Cloaking that friend's name was one that
Here we have Steve Newman stopped in a traffic stop that was after a homicide in Sandusky, Ohio. And the sheriff was stolen from his vehicle parked in front of his residence
alleged converting
several months before the homicide.
the circumstantial evidence against him. After witnesses, Special Agent Charles Holloway and agents court something more definite before they made arrests.
On March 14th, 1988, John's attorney
They learned
contacted
the
Cleveland House
regarding the
FBI.
blood evidence in the case. FBI serology experts had determined that the blood in David Hartlove's van had actually come from two individuals, presumably the victim and an assailant.
I am a tactical asset computer system.
Examiners compared the blood from the victim's van to that from the suspect's car.
The lab came back and told us that the blood which had been recovered in Steve E's vehicle matched the blood that had been recovered in Hartlove's vehicle.
The match was at the blood type level only. Still, it meant that the man in the back seat of the traffic stop was likely the killer in the van. They hoped the revolutionary DNA technology being developed would reveal a more exact molecular match.
I had read an article in one of the FBI publications that the FBI was putting together its DNA unit. They were in the process of doing research. So, as much as we had blood in our case, which we felt could possibly be compared with a suspect, I contacted the section chief that was in charge of putting that unit together and spoke to him about the possibility of doing a DNA analysis in this case.
At the FBI lab in 1988, examiners like senior scientist Dr. Bruce Podolny were still testing the groundbreaking forensic science of DNA profiling.
DNA is the blueprint for what you are, what I am, what all living things are. So if we can tap into that blueprint, we can tap into information that helps us identify individuals.
Examiners were working to establish a scientifically sound way to profile the DNA from a known source, like the suspect's blood. and compare it to the DNA from an unknown source, like the blood left at a crime scene.
And we generated a profile of something like a barcode. And then we compare that barcode to another barcode. And the barcodes are in the same kind of pattern. They may have come from the same source.
By early 1989, after years of testing quality control, the examiners believed they were ready to use the science in the federal courts. The Hartlov case would be the first one. Examiners profiled the DNA sequence from the blood in the van and from the blood of John Bonds. Comparing the markers of the two sequences, they made a match. Exactly the evidence Assistant U.S. Attorney Jim Woolley needed.
The DNA was a critical piece of the puzzle because it provided virtually conclusive evidence that John Ray Bonds, a member of the biker gang, the third man in the backseat of the car was sneaking and marked on his stop 5 minutes from the homicide, had bled inside the van.
March 7, 1989. More than a year after the murder, it was time to bring in the killers. In the hours before dawn, SWAT teams prepared for a simultaneous takedown of the three suspects. They knew it was safest to catch them while they were still asleep. The teams fanned out to the homes of Yee, Verdi, and Bonds. They hoped to strike before the suspects could warn one another or flee. One team moved on Verdi's house, while another entered Yee's. Mark Verdi was arrested without a struggle. At the same time, 20 miles away, his fellow gang member Stephen Yee was taken into custody as well. But the third suspect, John Ray Bonds, was not at home. Nor was he with known family members. The man investigators believed was a ruthless assassin was again on the run. In the summer of 1989, authorities on the trail of fugitive John Ray Bonds had him profiled on a nationally televised crime show. On the program, they described Bonds, his distinctive tattoos, and the places he frequented, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize the suspected murderer. On the afternoon of November 8, 1989, a patron at a bar in Paducah, Kentucky, spotted Bonds. He remembered the tattoos on the fugitive's hands from the TV show and took a chance. He contacted the local sheriff and called the FBI resident agency in Paducah. They were ready to arrest Bonds, but they had to be careful, according to Special Agent Stuart Show.
They felt going into the bar, there may be some trouble if they entered the bar at that point, because there were a lot of biker types in the bar, and they did not want to have any type of confrontation. They felt it would be much safer to set up some type of roadblock.
The FBI, Kentucky State Police, and local officers staged a fake traffic accident on a road leading from the bar to a known biker clubhouse in the area. When Bonds and another gang member left the bar, agents followed. As they hoped, the pair headed toward the clubhouse and got on the blocked road. The trooper waved them forward.
Don't worry about it.
And undercover police pulled in behind them. Though he didn't know it, Bonds was surrounded.
Get out of the car! Right now!
Nearly 2 years after the murder of David Hartlaw, John Ray Bonds was finally in custody. Now, he and the other two suspects, Stephen Yee and Mark Verdi, would stand trial for the killing. FBI senior scientist Dr. Bruce Bedoli had to help convince federal judges that the DNA evidence should be allowed in the trial.
New technologies as they enter the court will be challenged for their admissibility. So I had a role in going in to defend the technology to demonstrate that it met the scientific standards to be admitted into court so that the jury could hear about the evidence in the first place.
After months of hearings, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jim Woolley succeeded in getting the DNA evidence ruled admissible. With it and the other evidence, he went into the trial confident.
This is a case where just piece after piece after piece of evidence was built through forensic testing, ballistic testing, serology, forensic chemistry, hair and fiber analysis, DNA analysis, serial restoration, and you start just building those things one on top of the other, and there's really very little that a defense attorney can say when faced with a case like that.
Stephen Yee, Mark Verdi, and John Bonds were all convicted of murder and sentenced to life. The unrelenting investigation put 3 killers behind bars and helped open the door for a forensic technology that has changed criminal investigations forever. In the Midwest, the fugitive drug dealer will do anything to avoid capture. His desperate run is fueled by drugs and punctuated by gunfights. As he barrels across 2 states, local and federal authorities are determined to fight back and to stay in pursuit.
When law enforcement officers become targets, no one is safe. So when a crystal meth dealer on the run from the law began shooting cops, it took more than police to stop him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. With a fearless killer on the loose in the Midwest, residents have to help the FBI and state and local police bring down the dealer and deliver him to justice.
February 2nd, 2000, on the quiet back roads of Lincoln County, Nebraska. Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight was on routine patrol when he saw a vehicle rapidly approach from behind. A maroon pickup truck sped past. McKnight spotted Texas plates on the pickup, but he could not make out the numbers. Deputy began cautious pursuit. Recent weather conditions had created black ice on the roads. Without the benefit of streetlights, the roads appeared normal, but were treacherously covered with patches of slick ice.
Subject is now turning off on the side
Deputy
road.
McKnight radioed for assistance.
Please alert all available units.
Several Nebraska State Patrol troopers mobilized to try to intercept the pickup. Whoever was in the truck seemed to have no regard for his own safety. Since the roads were free of other traffic, no one else was in danger. McKnight decided high-speed pursuit was not worth the risk.
It appeared as though he knew the area that he was in and due to the fact that he would take more chances and drive faster than I would, he was able to disappear.
Eventually, the truck vanished into the night.
I had called in for assistance from the department, and all the deputies and state troopers were working, and we combed the whole area looking for that vehicle, and it was to no avail.
Nebraska police issued a be on the lookout order for the maroon pickup with Texas plates. But that night, no one spotted the vehicle or its driver. A week later, 40 miles away in North Platte, Nebraska, deputies responded to a call from a farmer. He hadn't used his barn in years. So the farmer was surprised to discover someone had been working there recently, leaving a strange workplace behind. The deputies found chemicals and other items available in farm supply stores. They'd often seen this combination of materials in the area before. They were the ingredients needed to make methamphetamine, an illegal drug. They were addressed to Charles Moses Jr. in Kona, Texas. Deputies contacted Texas authorities asking for information on Moses. They received photos of Moses and learned there were warrants for his arrest for the theft of several firearms. Nebraska investigators also learned Moses drove a maroon pickup truck with Texas plates. The make and model of the truck matched the description of the one that had evaded Deputy McKnight only a week earlier. If Charles Moses was manufacturing methamphetamine, there was a good chance he was using it too. That might explain why Moses drove so recklessly on the night of the chase.
The people that use this become very paranoid. They have no pain threshold. Sometimes they're up for days, and they're just a real problem. They're hard to handle.
During their rounds in the tightly knit communities in the area, police showed the photo of Moses and asked if anyone had noticed an outsider fitting his description. Some residents reported seeing him in the past.
We were pretty sure that he was in the area.
But no one had seen him in several days, and Moses had no local address. At 11 p.m. on February 12, 2000, a week after the meth lab was discovered, Lincoln County Corporal Casey Nelms was about to start his shift. As was his routine, he picked up a cup of coffee before hitting the road. That night would prove to be anything but routine. Through the window, Nelms spotted a vehicle that matched the description of Charles Moses' pickup truck.
You too.
But he needed to get a look at the driver.
When he got out of the pickup, he resembled the individual that we were looking for.
The truck had Texas plates.
716-1089.
Nelms headed out to check the man's ID. But the man spoke first.
What's the road like out there? Pretty slick. Where are you heading? Just gotta head now. Going out. I approached him and asked him if he was where he was going, what he was doing. I asked him for his identification, and when he handed it to me, the name on the driver's license was Charles Moses. You're under arrest. I really expected that once I got a hold of him in the vehicle that I was going to be able to, take him out of the vehicle without any problem and place him under arrest, but he was just spectacularly strong. I just couldn't do anything with him, except just keep struggling with him to try to keep the weapon away from my face. I was pretty sure 2 of my rounds hit. The second round I saw it hit the back of the cab, and the third round it also hit the back of the cab.
Jones tried to follow, but the fugitive drove with the recklessness of a man on methamphetamine and disappeared. Nebraska State Patrol officers heard the shots fired call and joined the search for the would-be cop killer. Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight, who had chased the maroon truck before, heard about the pursuit on the radio. He needed to position himself in a place where he was likely to intercept noises.
There's an area that's commonly called the correction line. It's an area where I could see the best I thought possible 3 different roads intersecting that area. And that was the middle one. I could watch a mile behind me, that one, and a mile in front of me.
McKnight waited in the dark, hoping he was in the right place.
After about 10 or 15 minutes of sitting there, a vehicle did come from the west at the very road intersection that I was at. And as they got right to the front of my vehicle, I turned my headlights on and I saw the vehicle that was the same identical vehicle that I'd seen less than 2 weeks before. He was traveling in excess of 70 to 80 miles an hour, and being nighttime conditions, it was hard to see him, and he was out of distance me quite rapidly.
Deputy McKnight tried to maintain a visual of the pickup truck, but the vehicle seemed to disappear yet again. McKnight changed tactics.
At that point, he had pretty much, got ahead of me. At the same time, I had to slow down and check driveways and intersecting road intersections to make sure he hadn't turned off on me.
Then the deputy saw a vehicle's brake lights in the distance. It was idling at an intersection. Deputy McKnight called for backup. Moses had already fired at one officer. It was too dangerous for the deputy to advance alone. He waited for the backup officers. Before they came, Moses made his move. One bullet entered Stan McKnight's head. Another ripped through his hand.
Upon figuring out that I'd been hit by a bullet, I was going to try to call to the rest of the officers around to let them know what was going on. Only when I reached for the mic, I couldn't talk. My mouth was all full of blood and I was starting to choke. So I felt around and I found some napkins in the seat. And I got them shoved up in my mouth to make the blood go out. I got it spit out and I could talk. And let them know that I'd been hit and that the subject had went on to the left and was going to be chasing him.
Despite his injuries, Deputy McKnight was not going to give up his pursuit.
The wind was coming through the holes in the windshield, blowing glass all over. My left eye was completely shut from blood. My right eye was just blinking, but I could still see enough with my headlights to keep going down the road.
Based on the coordinates McKnight radioed, several teams of Nebraska State Patrol troopers headed towards stakeout positions in the area. They drove with their headlights and flashers off so they wouldn't alert Moses. Troopers in 2 cars positioned themselves on a dark county road and waited. Minutes later, headlights appeared. It was Moses. dark night, continued pursuit of Moses, a man willing to kill to stay on the run. In February of 2000, Nebraska authorities confronted Charles Moses, a Texas fugitive suspected of running a methamphetamine lab. Escaping, he led police on a high-speed chase, shooting one deputy in the head and a state trooper in the chest, before vanishing into the night. Paramedics stabilized the wounded trooper, then transported him to the nearest emergency room. Helping to process the crime scene was Nebraska State Patrol Sergeant Lynn Williams.
We secured the area, and then our major concern was obviously the gathering of evidence. So we collected the trooper's service pistol, his duty and gun belt, spent shell casings that were still at the scene. We took 35mm photographs, videotaped the scene.
Moses had fired several bullets. One struck the cruiser's reflective seal, perhaps the only thing visible in the dark prairie.
The bullet had passed through the door of the trooper's patrol car, had struck the trooper in the abdomen, piercing his bulletproof vest, as well as traveling through his body.
To get through that much protection, the gun Moses used against police had to be a powerful one.
It was obvious that this was a high-powered rifle. We were looking for some sort of assault rifle of something large bore, high-powered.
The state police brought the spent rifle slugs to their ballistics lab for analysis. Technicians there examined the size, weight, and metal composition of the slugs. They determined they were high-velocity rounds, most likely fired from a 7.62 SKS military assault rifle. Deadly weaponry designed for trained military personnel, something else entirely in the hands of the criminal. After the multiple cop shooting, the FBI joined the effort to capture Moses. Special Agent Ron Raywald took the call at the normally quiet North Platte, Nebraska FBI resident agency.
Our caseload primarily is in the area of white-collar crime, and it's not very common that we get called in to assist in investigations of violent criminal activity.
Agent Raywald gathered information to obtain an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant against Moses.
In this particular case, we anticipated that Moses would leave the state of Nebraska after he fled his arrest, and that the FBI could assist in locating him.
Hoping to catch Moses before he left Nebraska, authorities set up a command center at a state police barracks. Officers from virtually every law enforcement agency in the state shared intelligence on Moses. Several had had run-ins with him, usually in connection with clandestine meth labs.
He had a history of using abandoned farmsteads, farm places, not only for manufacture of methamphetamine, but for hiding and living as well. So we knew that we needed to be aware of this and target those areas for a search.
Hundreds of police vehicles across the state mobilized, with officers looking for any sign of Charles Moses or his maroon pickup truck. In the sprawling rural landscape, finding Moses would not be easy. Investigators also hoped the public would assist in the search. Media bulletins urged citizens to avoid Moses and to call the police if they spotted him. In the small town of Dickhead, Nebraska, 30 miles south of where the two officers were shot, a young farmer found tire tracks leading to a garage. His parents' car was usually inside. Instead, there was a maroon pickup truck. His parents' car was gone.
We are not that.
Recognizing the truck from media reports, the farmer called police. The Nebraska State Patrol confirmed that the truck belonged to Charles Moses and that officers had hit the vehicle when returning fire.
The license plate that we were looking for was still displayed on the truck, which was registered to Mr. Moses. It had evidence that it had been shot at with a firearm. The bullet holes were in the back portion of the cab. They had shattered the back window of the cab. Some had lodged in the dash of the cab, and some had passed out through the front windshield. Make sure you get this wheel.
Investigators also found evidence the suspect was wounded by at least one of the many shots fired at the vehicle.
We located human blood in the cab, the interior of the pickup. That led us to believe that possibly when the Lincoln County deputy had fired at Moses early on during the incident, that possibly he had been struck.
But if Moses was injured, he had the perfect drug to stay alert, pain-free and aggressive, to keep running without sleep.
There was a tremendous amount of paraphernalia located in his pickup that deals with cooking or manufacturing methamphetamine. He virtually had a lab present in the back of the truck.
Investigators also found survivalist gear, police radios, and weapons in the truck.
You cannot control hashtags.
What they didn't find was the high-powered assault rifle Moses used to shoot two police officers. An hour after the pickup was found, and 60 miles northwest in Ogallala, Nebraska, the Nebraska State Patrol responded to a call from a man who said he was an acquaintance of Charles Moses. The man said he had seen Moses 15 minutes earlier. Moses spoke to him at a truck stop. He was in a car that matched the description of the vehicle missing from the Dickens farm. While they talked, Moses heard a radio bulletin that said police were looking for the vehicle. He panicked. The man said he had waited 15 minutes to call police because he was afraid at first. The dangerous fugitive knew where his family lived. Police worried Moses would change vehicles again to throw them off his trail. Two hours after the last sighting, 20 miles south of the truck stop in Paxton, Nebraska, a farmer noticed fresh tire tracks outside a house on his family's farmstead, a house that was closed up and unused. He called his family to ask if anyone had been to the house.
We are not that traffic.
They hadn't, but they told him about the bulletins, warning of a dangerous fugitive in the area. They said he should leave the place immediately. A relative on the line heard the farmer talking to someone. The police would soon learn that Charles Moses had just claimed his first murder victim. The deadly fugitive was still on the run. Now, more desperate than ever. On February 14th, 2000, 36 hours after fugitive Charles Moses seriously wounded two Nebraska law enforcement officers, a murder investigation began in Paxton, Nebraska. The victim was a local farmer, killed while talking to a relative on his cell phone. The investigative team had to piece together the murder from crime scene clues. The circumstances indicated Charles Moses was involved, to Nebraska State Police Sergeant Lynn Williams.
We had learned that the victim had drove in the abandoned farmstead to check on tire tracks that he observed. We believe that he surprised Moses, and Moses reacted with that surprise and shot the victim, killing him. Moses then drugged the victim from the victim's pickup, placed him on the ground, and Moses then got back in the victim's pickup and left the scene.
Troopers found tracks consistent with those on the model of truck the killer drove, as well as broken glass from the truck on one side of the driveway. The position of the glass suggested the vehicle's driver's side window had been blown out. FBI Special Agent Ron Raywald knew the glass was an important clue.
I anticipated that Moses would try and use a defense of self-defense, stating that he was returning fire from someone shooting at him. I knew that I could determine how many shots were fired and the direction that the shots originated from. When a high-speed projectile hits a piece of glass and the glass breaks, physical characteristics are left in the glass. This answers questions for the crime scene investigator. It tells them which bullet hit first and the direction of travel of the bullet.
The glass would be examined later in the lab. Behind a barn, investigators found the stolen car that Moses was last seen driving. The car seemed hastily abandoned. In the back seat, troopers found chemicals, nozzles, and several firearms. It appeared that Moses had switched vehicles after he heard a radio report that police were looking for this car.
It was very obvious that Mr. Moses had been attempting to hide or camouflage, conceal the vehicle. He'd had a tarp over it, and Moses was in the process of covering the vehicle with broken and dead branches, tree branches, that sort of stuff.
Investigators found the victim's identification, but they couldn't find the cell phone he was using when he was murdered. They believe Moses had the phone with him in the farmer's blue pickup truck. They issued an APB to the vehicle and contacted cell phone companies to begin tracking the cell phone signal. While powered on, cell phones are constantly in search of the nearest tower to be ready for use. Police can flag a specific phone number and learn which tower is serving it. 2 hours after the farmer's murder was discovered, a cell phone tower in Oshkosh, Nebraska picked up the signal from the missing phone. But before police could respond to the location, the cell phone signal disappeared. The FBI also studied the glass fragments from the Farmstead crime scene.
I was able to determine that one bullet had been fired from outside the truck into the truck and that the bullet thereafter passed through the truck. My examination further disclosed that no shots were fired from inside the truck. This was not self-defense. This was murder.
Take a look at this.
With the farmer's murder and the theft of his pickup truck, the FBI issued another federal warrant against Charles Moses.
The facts of the case had changed significantly, and I was able to change the warrant application process to charge Mr. Moses with the federal carjacking statute with a homicide.
Lock their doors.
With Charles Moses crisscrossing the state, armed and out of control, Nebraska Governor Mike Johans held a news conference to warn the public.
This is a situation that we need to get through. Police are seeking Charles Moses.
It was clear the fugitive is ready to kill civilians to get what he wanted.
Considered armed and dangerous.
That evening, 80 miles to the west, near the Nebraska-Wyoming border, an elderly woman was enjoying a quiet evening. She heard someone breaking in through a door. She could hear an intruder walking through the house, then approaching her bedroom. It was too late to escape, so she did her best to hide.
Okay, we need a few
The evening news, it said Moses killed the last resident he surprised.
See you later, and sure.
It sounded like he was looking for something. And then left. The woman was unharmed and called police from the neighbor's house. She explained that she never saw the man's face. The deputies from the Scottsbluff, Nebraska Sheriff's Department found tire tracks consistent with those on the pickup truck stolen from the murdered farmer. They also recovered automotive glass near the left tire track. Its position suggested it came from the driver's side window. The window investigators believe Moses shot out while killing the farmer. Local officers contacted the FBI about the new development.
From the facts of the case and the type of glass left at that crime scene, it was obvious that Moses had been involved in that burglary and that he was traveling in a westerly direction.
With Charles Moses believed to be near Nebraska's western border, the FBI notified Wyoming law agencies that a killer might be headed their way. The small town of Lusk, Wyoming, is 20 miles from the Nebraska border. At the Lusk Police Department, Chief Gary Gill received the FBI bulletin.
That morning, we heard about Charles Moses from our dispatch. We knew that he was driving a Nebraska pickup truck, blue in color, and that he could be headed in any direction.
The Wyoming media warned the public about the fugitive. Around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the media alerts paid off.
We heard about the call from a truck driver who had called into dispatch and was relayed to our office that possibly that pickup truck Charles Moses was driving was at the south end parking lot of the truck stop here in Lusk.
Assistant Chief Dusty Christi responded to the scene along with Chief Gill. Several vehicles in the parking lot fit the description. Officers knew one of them might hold a murderer who also tried to kill 2 policemen.
We were looking at license plates. We spotted a blue pickup that matched the description.
The plates matched. It was the truck.
We decided to try to block him in if we could.
The officers approached from opposite directions. Someone was inside, but the officers couldn't tell if it was Moses. The truck's driver's side window appeared to be missing. If it was Moses, he might have finally come down off a long and haggard methamphetamine binge.
For sustenance.
Chief Gill called for backup and waited for more units to arrive.
This would be the vehicle I think we're looking for.
Then, the driver woke up.
He's waking up, he's gonna take off.
But Assistant Chief Chrisman couldn't risk fire because from his perspective, he did not get a good enough look to be absolutely sure it was Moses. It meant another chase.
Our biggest fear during the chase is when Moses turned on electric and more than likely a high rate of speed, and also the fear of maybe losing him once he got through the city limits and head north on Highway 85.
Weeks after Charles Moses' violent spree began, law enforcement once again had him in their sights. After eluding Nebraska authorities and the FBI, suspected murderer Charles Moses had crossed into Lusk, Wyoming. Lusk police were in pursuit. But Moses had a lead on him and never hesitated for a moment.
Mr. Moses finally got away from us off Highway 85 onto our ranch road. The road was very rutted up. Our small vehicles with two-wheel drive could not keep up with him in four-wheel drive in the pickup he had. He went down to a ranch place and across a old dam and up into the pastures through fences and things where we couldn't chase him.
Authorities lost him again. So Lusk police teamed with the Niobrara County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Samuel Reed helped devise a 10-mile perimeter to contain Moses.
The perimeter was a very large area. We were fortunate in one way. It sat kind of in the middle of three major highways. And we had another county road that dissected it basically in the middle.
They couldn't rush in.
We were unsure what his actions were going to be, so we stayed back away knowing that he had a high-powered rifle.
Every law enforcement officer in the area, including fish and game wardens, manned roadblocks to look for Moses and warned travelers to stay away from him. They also met with residents living in the 10-mile perimeter, asking them to stay vigilant and call police at the first sign of any suspicious activity.
So I had a very deep concern that if we did not apprehend Moses before it got dark, that we would have a terrible, terrible time finding him. I knew the ranch people that were there. I was very, very concerned for their safety of him entering the house at gunpoint, taking them hostage and shooting them and taking a vehicle and leaving the area.
Although Moses was somewhere within the 10-mile perimeter, the terrain made it too dangerous for deputies to go in on foot. Without body armor and tactical training, they would be vulnerable to ambush or a sniper attack.
For officers to go in there would have been extremely difficult. There are a lot of deep draws, pine trees, ravines that he could get down in. It would have been very, very, very difficult to go in there and find him.
Thanks. Special Agent Ron Raywald helped Wyoming authorities with the FBI's federal resources.
The Wyoming office of the FBI brought in 2 aircraft to assist in the search on the state highways and the rural roads, trying to locate the vehicle Moses was in.
Flying a grid pattern over the area, one of the aircraft spotted the truck Moses was last seen driving. It looked like it was stuck in a ravine. The SWAT team from the Nebraska State Patrol was airlifted to the area. Moses was armed with a high-powered rifle. The SWAT team had to move cautiously, man by man. An aggressive fugitive on powerful drugs could be behind any tree, ready to kill. They positioned themselves above the pickup, but they had no visual of Charles Moses. He might be watching them, waiting for a clean shot. They had to start their search from the truck. To stun and distract anyone near it, they fired a flashbang percussion grenade.
I don't think that program, that radio program is not in our.
He wasn't there. They found footprints in the mud by the truck. and began following them. But in the trees, the trail went cold.
He had eluded us, the people that were right on the scene. He had eluded a SWAT team that had been flown in out of Nebraska.
That night, Moses would surface again. At 8:30 p.m., rancher Jim Kramers and his son Justin heard their dog barking at something behind the house. They knew about Moses, so Justin went out armed. Someone was out there.
I've got a gun, don't go any further.
From the brief look, they believed it was Moses. The gunman had to be stopped.
Justin, take your rifle, go around back, get on the back side of him, then you do what you have to do. Okay?
Kramers was unarmed, in a standoff with a desperate fugitive who had never hesitated to use violence. The rancher had a plan and hoped it would work. In eastern Wyoming, a rancher and his son found fugitive Charles Moses on their property. From media reports, rancher Jim Kramers knew Moses was wanted for shooting several police officers and killing a farmer for his truck.
Justin, you know, on the back side.
Justin Kramers went to cover Moses from the back. The father risked his life, hoping to end the fugitive's rampage without more violence.
I was totally unarmed. Moses had a rifle and a large caliber pistol in his hands.
Hoping his son could protect him if his plan failed, Jim Kramers offered Moses a deal. He knew the fugitive had been exposed to the day's cold rain showers. If Moses put down the guns and came inside, the rancher would give him a hot meal and throw his clothes in the dryer.
This was a plan in my head that if I got him in the house, I had nothing to fear from him because we would know that he had no weapons. It was too cold, and if he ran out of the house without any of his clothes with him, why, he was not going to be in good shape. I very seldom invite someone into my house that I don't ask them to eat, so I knew he was hungry, so I said, let's have something to eat.
If they got him inside, they would try to call the police without him knowing. By this time, Justin Kramers had Moses in his sights. It looked like Moses was going for it. Then he tensed.
All right, I put my rifle down now. Where's the other guy you're with?
Jim Kramers hoped Moses would not draw his son into his violence.
My greatest concern throughout the ordeal was that my son would not have to shoot someone. I didn't want him, justly or unjustly, I did not want him to have to go through life knowing that he had killed a person.
If it did turn violent, Justin could not waver.
Justin!
One of the fears I had was if I did have to shoot at him that I might miss. I only had one shot while he had up to 6 in his pistol, where I had a single shot rifle.
After weeks of a methamphetamine-induced rampage, Charles Moses finally slowed down.
All right, let's go on into the house and get your food.
He left his weapons outside.
I never actually lowered my rifle. I brought it down a small ways, but within quick enough time enough that I could have brought it back up to put on him if I needed to.
Inside the warm house and out of his wet clothes, Moses concentrated on his first hot meal of the day.
I was able to go out the front door of the house and was gone for around 5 minutes while I called the sheriff from my brother's house, and then I was able to come back in the same door while he never realized I was gone.
A Lusk police officer and a Wyoming game warden were there in minutes. Because of the Kramer's plan, the wild, deadly fugitive had nothing to fight with. After a staggering chase across hundreds of miles, filled with burglary, carjacking, gunfights, and murder, Charles Moses Jr. was finally in police custody. As they theorized, Moses had been wounded by Nebraska deputies. At a Cheyenne, Wyoming hospital, Moses was treated for a bullet wound to his shoulder, dehydration, and exhaustion. The drugs he had taken, and the police relentlessly on his trail, had run him into the ground. FBI Special Agent Ron Raywald arranged for Moses to be transported back to Nebraska.
The morning after the arrest, when I drove to Cheyenne, Wyoming, I took a lieutenant with the Nebraska State Patrol with me, and I took Deputy Casey Nelms with me, the individual that had attempted to initiate the arrest originally. The purpose of taking these two individuals with me was so that when I returned to Nebraska with Moses, both individuals could effect the respective warrants that they were carrying. The lieutenant from the patrol arrested Moses for the violation of shooting a Nebraska State Patrol trooper, and Casey Nelms arrested Moses for the murder of the farmer as well as the assault by shooting of the two deputies from Lincoln County.
Moses initially fought the charges against him. But when confronted with ballistics and other forensic evidence, he plea bargained to avoid the death penalty. Charles Moses Jr. pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and 2 counts of assault on a police officer. He was sentenced to 190 years in prison. The state trooper Moses shot returned to light duty in June of 2000. Moses had also shot Lincoln County Sheriff's Deputy Stan McKnight in the head and hand. He spent nearly 2 months in the hospital. Never willing to give up, McKnight was determined to return to his regular patrol.
I had to go back for several different operations, with a total of 9 operations and 23 months of continuing therapy. After the doctors had stated that they had done all that they could for me, I was checked and we went through all the physical dexterity, and I was able to go back to work and maintain and do what I was doing before.
Methamphetamine has become the biggest drug problem in the Midwest. Law enforcement there are dedicated to fight it, whatever the cost. In Washington, D.C., a notorious drug gang threatens an entire neighborhood. Witnesses are intimidated or killed. Even as the police and the FBI build a case against the killers, the body count continues to climb. Drug sales skyrocket as a neighborhood becomes a virtual war zone. Now the FBI must find the key to destroying a deadly gang known throughout the city as the K Street Crew.
full swing. The front lines were often America's inner cities, where gangs used violence and murder to rule their empires. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. When gang violence exploded in Washington, D.C., the Metro Police and the FBI fought back. Using high-tech surveillance and tough new laws, they set out to destroy the gangs from the inside out.
Washington, D.C. In this city of monuments and museums lies the heart of American justice. The Supreme Court, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But even our nation's capital is not immune to crime. March 22nd, 1991. 20-year-old Wendy York returns home after running errands. She shares an apartment with her cousins, Teresa Lucas. Teresa is in the living room, lying on the couch. Her face is covered with blood. Wendy runs from the apartment and calls 911. An emergency dispatcher directs units to the scene. DC Metro Police arrive at the apartment within minutes. Teresa Lucas has been shot through the head. In a back bedroom, they find another body and a child. The second victim is Teresa's sister, Teresa. She has also been shot in the head. Her child is unharmed. Police discover another baby, terrified but also unharmed. It's Teresa's child. It seems both children have been alone with the bodies for hours. A short time later, the victim's mother arrives at the apartment. Renee Brown finds the building surrounded by police.
My mind was racing and I was trying to get in. The police were holding me back. They said, you can't get in. I said, this is my house. I have to go in. That was the most horrific day of my life. I will never forget it. They were very devoted and dedicated mothers. They loved their kids and they didn't deserve to die.
Crime scene investigators process the apartment. They find no signs of forced entry. Nothing in the apartment appears to be disturbed. No valuables have been taken. There is nothing that suggests a motive for the brutal slaying. Detectives suspect the victims knew their killer.
Yes, the tactical asset system is active.
Detectives ask Renee Brown to check the apartment.
Yes, the tactical asset system is active.
The grieving mother is willing to do anything she can to help. Renee notices something missing from Teresa's bedroom.
The first thing I noticed was that a poster-sized picture that was there the previous night had disappeared from off the wall.
A frame is found, but a photo of Teresa's boyfriend, Sam Carson, is gone.
And I told the detective then, I said, I wonder where that picture is. And we looked in the trash in the back, and it was nowhere in the trash. So I said, whoever has that picture is the murderer.
Yes, we have.
Police contact Sam Carson to ask him a few questions. He denies being in the apartment the night the two women were murdered. Although Carson is a likely suspect, police have no physical evidence to tie him to the murders.
Where were you last night? Are they around right now?
Detectives interview people in the neighborhood. Although gunshots were fired in the Lucas apartment, neighbors claim they heard nothing.
I don't know the women? No.
Two young women have died. and yet nobody is willing to talk about it.
We are not built of it.
The double homicide catches the attention of law enforcement across the district, including the FBI. Special Agent Vince Lissy is shocked by the brutality of the crime.
Right here. We got the photos that got from Craig.
Agent Lissy often works undercover and must protect his identity.
It was horrific. The police had very few leads to go on. They struggled and struggled with the investigation for some time, but there were no real witnesses to it.
Without a witness, police cannot identify a suspect. Without a motive, they cannot catch the Lucas girl's killer. And without evidence, the double homicide will become a statistic. Yet another unsolved murder in a city plagued with violence. The epicenter of that violence is Greenleaf Gardens, a housing project on K Street. The drug trade has reduced the neighborhood to chaos, according to Detective Steve Kirshner.
Crack cocaine hit the city hard in 85, 86.
Yes, the tactical
Along with that came a lot of violence. The homicide rate went sky high. I believe it started out mostly from jealousy of who was making the most money. There were kidnappings, assaults. It just led to a very violent area.
It is not bloody.
Buyers, many of them from the suburbs, made the dealers on K Street rich. The area provided few economic opportunities, so the lure of easy money proved a powerful recruiting tool.
It was a huge moneymaker for them, and it was pretty hard to tell a 14 or 15-year-old kid, hey listen, go to school, do all the right things, whenever they can go out on the street, sell crack and make $1,000 a day. They could buy all the things that they didn't have before because they lived in an impoverished home.
With millions of dollars in easy profits at stake, competition between dealers grew fierce. Streets became borders as gangs battled over sales turf. The neighborhood was a powder keg, according to Metro Homicide Detective Tony Brigadini.
The area was deadly. The numbers that we have compiled over the years of the investigation showed that this was probably one of the most deadly areas in the District of Columbia. It's very close to some of the government buildings in Southwest Washington, which was interesting in that there's an incredible amount of crime going on in a small area so close to a downtown business district.
The FBI and DC Metro Police formed the Safe Streets Task Force. Their job is to clean up a neighborhood that has become a war zone. Agents canvass the streets, looking for information on the gangs. Residents are too afraid to talk, or even be seen speaking with investigators.
If you walk up to somebody's door and you knock on their door and ask to speak to them, in about 3 minutes everybody in that neighborhood is going to know that the police are there.
Frustrated by the lack of cooperation, agents try a different approach.
Sometimes we follow people to work. We try to get them away from the neighborhood. We try to do whatever we can so that the people in the neighborhood don't know they're witnesses.
Slowly, the residents open up. They talk about drug dealers who have taken over the neighborhood. The K Street Crew. The gang is led by Vincent Hill, a ruthless sociopath who seems to thrive on violence.
If somebody came up and irritated him for any reason whatsoever, he had no problem grabbing a baseball bat, a hammer, anything he could, and hit them with it.
Hill's money and his brutality make him the most powerful man in the neighborhood, according to Metro Detective Neil Trugman.
He compared himself to a big-time mob figure. There was no fear.
According to FBI sources, Vincent Hill runs the K Street crew with an iron fist. Still, gang members respect him.
Vincent Hill had a reputation for being a bully, but at the same time, others looked up to him because they saw that he had money, he had nice clothes, he had fancy cars. While he's manipulating them into selling drugs, they would see him beat somebody up for not giving him enough money. So all of these things kind of led the others to look to him as somebody that you didn't want to mess with, you didn't want to challenge, but at the same time, he was a way that they could make money.
The distribution of crack cocaine carries severe penalties. A conviction could get Vincent Hill and his crew off the streets permanently.
They're going to start selling a lot of marijuana.
Agents launch an investigation into the gang's crack dealing. But Hill's group is already one step ahead. Before the FBI can bust the K Street crew on cocaine charges, the gang suddenly shifts to selling marijuana.
They realized when they were selling crack cocaine, you're looking at stiff time. Selling marijuana was a misdemeanor. More than likely, you wouldn't get any time for it.
The demand is huge. Buyers pour in from the suburbs. The gang maintains its profits, minimizing the risk of jail time.
It just took off like a rocket. Everybody was making money. People were making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a day just by selling marijuana.
Thwarted by the gang's move, the task force regroups as the dealers grow even bolder.
I would drive by in unmarked cars and they would hold bags of marijuana up, 3 for 20, 3 for 20. And then when they finally got close enough to realize that you were a cop, they would run.
We are clear from radio units.
The dealers simply abandon their stashes until the cops leave. Minutes later, the dealers return to the exact same spot with a new stash and set up shop again. As business expands, the violence escalates, sometimes involving innocent victims. On August 29, 1992, Travis Ross and 2 friends are mistaken for rival drug dealers. Ross is killed instantly. Both of his friends are critically wounded. Police interview the survivors. They say they have no idea who shot them or why. Their reluctance to answer questions is understandable. Police believe the K Street crew has already murdered a dozen people who cooperated with authorities. What they don't know is how the gang is able to identify these potential witnesses. In 1995, Bruce Spencer is shot 5 times at point-blank range by a K Street crew member.
Yes, the tactical asset system is active.
Somehow he survives. He is willing to identify the man who shot him. The task force immediately places Spencer in protective custody. He's registered at a DC hospital under the name John Doe.
Yes, the tactical asset system is active.
While Spencer recuperates, Agent Lissy and other investigators scour Greenleaf Gardens looking for the men who tried to kill him. On K Street, Agent Lissy and Detective Trugman find themselves face to face with Vincent Hill, the gang's notorious leader.
I said, look, all your witnesses are gonna die, every one. Even your buddy who's in the hospital named John Doe in room, and he told me exactly what room it was. And I shook my head as if I didn't know what he's talking about, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. They wanted to let us know that it was their business to locate witnesses and silence them.
Investigators are even more determined to protect their witness.
Activate radio recording transmissions.
But word of Hill's threat reaches Spencer. Fearing for his life, the witness refuses to help investigators.
Everything's working out. He's not.
The task force is frustrated, having lost another battle in their war against the K Street crew. In the 1990s, Greenleaf Gardens in the southwest section of Washington, D.C. is a neighborhood under siege. A gang calling itself the K Street Crew has claimed the housing project as its base of operations and turned it into a killing zone. Metro Police, working closely with the FBI, struggle to link the gang to a rash of killings. Investigators know it will take more than individual murder convictions to stop the widespread violence. They need a strategy that will take down the entire gang. The Joint Task Force decides to use RICO, a federal racketeering statute, that will allow them to prosecute the K Street Crew as a single, corrupt organization that sells drugs and commits murder to protect their interests.
The location coordinates.
Homicide detectives re-examine dozens of cold cases. Cases that were once attributed to the random violence of the projects. They search for anything that will link the K Street Crew to murder, according to Detective Tony Brigadini.
Some of the cases that we were investigating were 8 years old, 10 years old. We would have to go back and research case jackets, try to find evidence that had been collected 8 or 10 years earlier, try to locate crime scene photographs, things of that nature.
Yeah, here it is. See this car? Is that the same?
So, in trying to build a strong case, we were dealing with very little information.
Yes, strange is as
In the meantime, agents launch a covert surveillance operation to gather evidence on the gang's growing drug business. Special Agent Vince Lissy.
We wanted to show the conspiratorial nature of these guys, how they operated on the street, how they took turns selling drugs, who supplied who. And we thought that if we could have undercovers introduced to the group, that we could accomplish this.
FBI agents set up a stakeout in an apartment overlooking K Street. The landlord offers it to them free of charge. Like most of the residents of Greenleaf Gardens, he's sick of the drugs and the violence.
We got some camera equipment, video, and still photos, and we would sit up there and watch them and try to get the people on K Street's patterns down. We would see Vincent Hill out there and see how he operated.
Investigators watch the area for weeks. Once they've established the gang's patterns, they develop a plan. Most of the drug transactions on K Street are conducted with buyers in cars. To get closer to the dealers, they'll need a vehicle.
I am listening to voice comment.
We decided the best approach was to use a pickup truck. We got the oldest, dirtiest pickup truck the FBI had. We bought some toolboxes and put toolboxes on the back of the truck to make it look like a construction truck.
The truck is rigged with surveillance cameras and microphones. Two Metro investigators, Joe Abdallah and Jim Scheider, are recruited from another precinct. As outsiders, they will not be recognized by gang members. They will pose as construction workers to make drug buys. Metro investigator Joe Abdallah.
So me and Jimmy had it prearranged. If I was in any trouble, I felt my safety was in jeopardy, I was going to run for that truck, and depending on the situation, Jimmy was going to take off with me jumping in the back of that truck, or he would get out with his firearm.
The main target of the surveillance operation is Vincent Hill. The undercover officers expect they will have to make several buys before they can make contact with the gang leader. 5 cars carrying 2-man teams form a perimeter around the neighborhood. They stand by on their radios, awaiting Lissy's orders.
We had all this in place. We had the cars situated throughout the neighborhood. And we said, okay, let's go, let's try it.
As the officers attempt their first undercover buy, Jim Scheider knows he is heading into dangerous territory.
As soon as we turned a corner, my heart started racing. We knew that no turning back at that point.
Abdallah and Scheider look for a dealer, any dealer, to buy from. Then on a street corner, they spot Vincent Hill, flanked by his lieutenants. The K Street crew is out in force.
Can I get a couple bags?
Abdallah doesn't think twice. He gets out of the truck.
And I'd asked if I could get 2 bags for $40, which meant 2 bags of marijuana, which were $50, but if I could, I'd get them for $40 a piece.
Okay, we need fuel.
An individual to my left side ran to go get them from a stash, which was on a fence line.
The wind is good for power generation.
And Vincent Hill said, no, you'll take 2 for $50. I put the money down, and then I walked away.
The surveillance team documents the entire transaction.
I am attacking.
They now have the leader of the K Street crew on videotape, personally selling marijuana to undercover officers.
Cheers.
We joked about Vincent Hill the first time.
You cannot
and we said, wow, this is too easy. Within 30 seconds of being just done.
Radio recording transmissions.
Jim and Joe rolled back to the office, and we were just amazed.
The task force has been prepared to wait weeks, even months, to make contact with Hill. But it happened in less than a minute. The FBI presses their advantage. Over the next 6 months, they continue to buy marijuana directly from Hill, gradually increasing the quantity. Each time, the sale is carefully photographed.
He was there. Never touched the drugs.
Through the undercover buys, investigators discover that Hill controls everything that happens on the block. This becomes clear when Abdallah and Scheider try to make a purchase from someone other than Hill.
And we were getting ready to make a purchase. And there was someone hollering down the street. When we looked back, it was Vincent Hill. We went back down into the block, met with Vincent Hill and bought from him. And I think he had that kind of power in that block.
For months, the buys go on like clockwork. Abdallah is doing more than making purchases. He's building a relationship.
Cheers.
Slowly, he gains Hill's trust and tries to get information.
I tried to get any conversations I could from him, and there were times when I try and draw a conversation from him where he would say, look, if the police come in the block, I have a place to run to, you don't. So tell me what you need, let's get it over with. And there were also times when I had a conversation with him about setting up weight purchases, or more than the $20 bag, what we would call wholesale quantities, like quarter pounds.
Abdallah begins buying in bulk, moving from ounces to pounds. He tells Hill he is selling marijuana at the construction site where he works.
There were occasions when he would actually front me drugs, which would mean he'd give them to me for free for payment at a later date. We had that kind of trust. And he even gave me good advice on when buying the weight. He would supply me with the smaller $20 bags. He gave me packages of those at some points, and he would tell me how to juggle it, or break it down and sell it in the quantities to my friends. And he gave me helpful hints on how to do that.
For 6 months, the operation runs smoothly. Then, a routine buy puts everyone on guard.
Well, at one point when I made a buy from him, I got back into the truck, and Jimmy was driving and I was in the passenger seat, and Jimmy said, hey, he's waving at you. And he was motioning like to roll the window down. So I rolled the window down, and he said, hey, look, these guys over here, and they're saying that your buddy's a police officer. He said, I know you're okay. But he said, those guys over there will kill you.
Yo, I know y'all can't play with that, right?
And it threw us off a little bit, and then when we started to leave, the guys that he was pointing to had like hoods over their faces and put their heads away from us.
It does not appear to Abdallah and Shida that Hill suspects they're cops. So they continue the operation.
A real shooting took place behind Charno's No Cops.
A week later, the two detectives pull into K Street.
You are not Johnny.
Vincent Hill is there.
A real shooting took place.
Hill was cold to me. He didn't want anything to do with me. He said he didn't know where they sold marijuana. He didn't know what I was talking about.
For sustenance.
And it was very confusing because even when he was angry and sold, he was just in a hurry. He said, "What do you need? Hurry up and get out of here." But on this day, he's like, "I don't have anything. I don't know what you're talking about. You can go somewhere else."
Hill sends them to another dealer down the block. That night, Abdallah meets the dealer in an abandoned house. The officer prepares for a confrontation.
The gentleman walked into a vacant house, called me in. The gentleman tried to give me like a sandwich baggie full of lawnmower clippings. It wasn't real marijuana. So at that point, we knew something was wrong.
Abdallah knows their cover is blown. With backup cars at least 2 minutes away, he slowly talks his way out of the building. The undercover operation is over. After 6 months of drug buys, the task force still does not have enough evidence to put Vincent Hill and his gang in prison once and for all.
Had we charged him with the drug conspiracy alone, it might have gotten them 10 years, maybe 5 years. And what's even worse, they would have been held accountable for all the violent crimes they committed. So we still needed to investigate the murders and the robberies and the kidnappings and all the violent crimes that were associated with that group.
Investigators still have a lot of work to do. In the meantime, the streets rage with violence. In Washington, D.C., a lengthy undercover operation has begun to produce results. Investigators have videotaped the infamous K Street crew selling drugs. But now, they must find evidence of the gang's more violent activities. In 1995, a brave young woman steps forward.
So what would you like to
Christi Gladden is 19 years old.
that you can share with me?
As a single mother, she is worried about her neighborhood. Christi tells police that Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight are responsible for a drive-by shooting. She overheard Martin talking about it. Although she doesn't know the victim's name, her description of the crime leads investigators to an unsolved murder. 6 months earlier, Travis Ross had been killed in a drive-by shooting near K Street. Two of his friends were critically wounded. Chrissy wants to testify against the gang. She knows they are the reason her neighborhood is so dangerous. Still, she's afraid. She tells investigators that if she speaks out against the K Street crew, they will kill her. Chrissy Gladden and 2 other women finally agree to testify. But only if the FBI places them in the witness protection program. Special Agent Vince Lissy.
We finally convinced Chrissy, as well as these other female witnesses, that we would work with them. We would try to keep them safe and make sure nothing happened to them. We stressed upon them not to tell people where they lived, not to take people to their new apartments.
Chrissy's cooperation pays off. Crew members Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight are indicted for murder.
Cheers. Slide up to your bicep.
Lissy believes they have enough evidence to get a conviction. Even though one witness is recanted, 2 others, including Chrissy, are still willing to testify.
It's not a big deal.
The week before the trial of Joe Martin, we were constantly re-interviewing witnesses, talking to them, getting them ready to testify. We want them to know what questions they're going to be asked if they take the stand to testify. And the week before, we had Christi in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We got her ready. She pretty much knew what was going to be expected of her. She wasn't an eyewitness to the murder, but she did fill in certain gaps.
4 days before the start of the murder trial, Vince Lissy receives a call from one of the witnesses.
She was frantic, screaming, crying, telling me they killed Christi, Christi's dead. And I couldn't believe it.
The temperature is
and then whenever I realized what she was talking about, it was like somebody punched me in the stomach.
Okay, are you coming over later?
Agent Lissy drives over to the Southwest District.
What happens next?
At the crime scene, Metro Police tell him what happened.
Get that mark right away.
You are not Heath.
According to witnesses, Chrissy attended a party on 37th Street at the home of Antonio Knight's girlfriend. As she left the party, 2 gunmen appeared and opened fire.
Okay, are you coming over later?
By the time police arrived, Chrissy was already dead. Not surprisingly, investigators are unable to find a single witness willing to identify Chrissy's killers.
That radio program is...
The message from the K Street crew is clear. Talking to the police is a death sentence.
Christi thought that everything was fine. She trusted her friends, she trusted the people in that neighborhood, thought she could go back there, nothing was going to happen.